Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief. One of the companies that there has been a lot of speculation about recently is Character AI. I've said previously on this show that Character AI is, for me, the AI startup where I most know that I am not the target audience, and so its usage numbers always surprise me. The long and the short of it is that a ton of people spend a ton of time every day interacting with AIs on Character AI. Some of the AIs that people interact with are, of course, representations of famous people. Others are just new characters that they've invented. You can see when you land on the homepage that they suggest that people do things like practice a new language, or plan a trip, or practice interviewing, or write a story. But whatever people are doing, they are doing a lot of it. People are literally spending hours every day interacting. But of course, in AI land, all of that interaction costs a lot of money. And so one of the big questions is, would Character AI be able to remain independent, or would they have to cozy up ultimately with one of the big tech companies? The last we discussed this was about a week ago when there were reports that Elon Musk had been in conversations on acquiring Character AI as part of his xAI startup. Now, Elon denied those reports, leaving the future of the company still in question. At the time, as I said, it wasn't that Character AI was at risk of running out of money imminently. It was just that either they were going to have to raise an additional amount of money pretty soon, or end up landing with one of the big tech cos. At the very end of last week, the answer became clear, as Character AI was the latest company to have the sort of acquisition, but sort of, but not exactly, that has come to characterize the AI space. Just like the deal between Microsoft and Inflection, and a more recent deal between Amazon and Adept, it was announced on Friday that Google would be hiring the Character AI co-founders and many of the team members, as well as licensing its model. This was also notable because the founders of Character had previously been Google employees. From the information, Google has agreed to pay a licensing fee to chatbot maker Character AI for its models and will hire its co-founders and many of its researchers. Character's leaders told staff on Friday that investors would be bought out at a valuation of about $88 per share. That's about 2.5 times the value of shares in Character's 2023 Series A, which valued the company at $1 billion. As part of the deal, CEO Noam Shazier and President Daniel De Freitas are going back to Google after leaving to start Character back in November 2021. Now, unlike in the Inflection deal where a huge portion of the team seemed to head over to Microsoft, in this case around 30 of the roughly 130 team members will be headed to Google while the rest will remain with Character AI. Those 30 represent the part of Character's team that are working on model training and voice artificial intelligence. Reports are that Character itself will switch to open source models such as Llama 3.1 rather than in-house models. And really this seems to come down to a couple big things. On the one hand, it is a reflection of the cost of running an AI startup, particularly when it comes to one who's using custom models. Character had also held talks with Meta and xAI, which the information framed as a recognition of the, quote, steep costs of training conversational AI models with a relatively small base of paying subscribers face. The other side of this is the big tech acquirer side. There clearly seems to be a goal here of avoiding antitrust scrutiny, but it's not exactly clear that that's going to work. For example, the FTC is currently investigating the Microsoft Inflection deal to decide whether it should have actually been considered an acquisition. Response in the AI community has been sort of surprised on a general sense, but not surprised in specific. Investor and CMO Kieran Flanagan writes, Google hiring Character AI founding team is pretty wild. Character AI got a bunch of usage, but doesn't seem to have a path to revenue growth if their founding team is willing to jump ship. The Information writes, did Google just pay $2.5 billion to hire Character's CEO? The piece reads, Google may have just paid one of the biggest signing bonuses in the history of Silicon Valley to hire 2 AI researchers who left the search giant 3 years ago. Basically, the point of this is that Google is paying a 2.5x premium on the previous valuation of the company, although what's not clear is how much is actually going to these founders. In other words, what package they got. Investors are getting out with the shirts on their backs, but obviously this kind of sucks for the employees that are not being invited to go over to Google. And overall, to the Information, it just seems pretty surprising. They wrote, it's been obvious for a while that Character would have to sell itself, so the main questions were the buyer and the price they'd be willing to pay. While millions of people apparently use Character's product to talk to all manner of chatbots, it was never going to be easy to turn that usage into revenue. Character generates money by selling subscriptions to its chatbots, but a number of Character's users are young, which complicates things. And second, some people use the app for romantic roleplay, but those types of chatbots are actually prohibited, and Character says it removes them. There was also no indication that Character had invented LLMs that were on par with those of Google or OpenAI. The company touted its ability to run its chatbot cheaply, but that's not enough to convince us this was anything but an acqui-hire. If nothing else, they write, this deal shows just how important AI talent is to Google. Now, another piece that you may have seen me take some issue with on Twitter was this one from Fortune, which was titled, Google's hiring of Character AI's founders is the latest sign that part of the AI startup world is starting to implode. The piece is by Sharon Goldman, who is far from a cynical AI critic when it comes to journalists, And my issue was this characterization of implosion. Sharon's argument in follow-up conversations was that she was referring specifically to the portion of the AI field that is trying to support its own models and finding it very, very costly to do so. As she writes, character AI is not alone in having a tough time in an industry in which eye-popping amounts of fundraising is required in order to survive due to the massive cost of computing power to train the AI models. My issue was the framing of this as an implosion rather than the natural consolidation process that happens a couple years into any new startup movement. I think there is a lot that's interesting here and worthy of discussion. It is certainly another indication that trying to compete with custom models is a very, very expensive proposition, and one that cuts off all but the most extremely well-resourced companies, and even frankly some of them as well. To the extent that's the argument, I completely agree. But I also think this idea of implosion suggests that somehow this wasn't the default likely outcome. All of these startups like Inflection and Adept and Character AI now, that have had these weird acqui-hire type deals, have been competing in extremely difficult areas. Inflection was, we can't forget, making a bet on this personal artificial intelligence, some sort of interactive experience, which was in itself a total bet on a new type of behavior that didn't necessarily have a lot of precedent. In other words, it wasn't clear that there was even room in the market or demand for that particular type of consumer experience. Same with Character AI. Character AI is also betting on a new type of consumer interaction. Now, notably, Character AI found that there was some amount of demand for this type of interaction. It just wasn't, at least at that time, or at least for that team, a cost-effective business to service that type of demand. Perhaps a more interesting question is whether Character AI really needed to be pursuing its own custom models. Was that actually the way that this type of startup was going to work, or is there a different model available? Unfortunately, at this time, we're not going to be able to find out because that talent is being absorbed back into the Borg of Google. But it's not at all clear to me that the differentiator when it comes to an experience like Character AI is trying to create is an underlying model difference versus an overall experience design. We will certainly be able to see going forward whether Character AI is able to rebuild something for the people that stick around, how it compares to, for example, Meta's attempt to integrate these sort of character-based AIs into existing platforms like Instagram. And of course, we continue to have this question of whether these deals will just become the norm or whether the government will come down on them as just trying to get around the rules. My biggest concern, frankly, here is not what it says about hype in the AI cycle, so much as what it means for early employees at these companies. It doesn't do a lot to incentivize people to work at startups if they anticipate that basically the exit path is just founders being bought out and going back to big tech. Anyways, that is the story though for here. It's a really interesting one, no doubt, but that is going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief. Until next time, peace.